All right. So Nick, you played 8 years in the NFL. So to start, I just want to pull up a couple pictures that might bring up a few memories for you. All right. So I'm going to
One.
share my screen real quick. So here's one of my favorites that I found. So Royster there is just getting leveled.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know what the play was
Little
or
top.
if you remember that, but
Yeah, just a little high-low action. Hard to keep your balance.
nice. Yep. All right. I got one more that I'll pull up. All right. Do you happen to remember? Did you bring him down or did he get away?
He got away. He
Okay.
definitely threw it. I'm pretty sure he threw it away. And actually, it's interesting you pulled this up. This was actually my last game.
Oh,
This
really?
was the Yeah, this was the game I got hurt in and never came back.
Wow.
But
Yep.
my career started and ended in Wisconsin, which I feel good about. So,
Interesting. Yeah, that is pretty cool.
yeah.
Are you like, do you have a good memory for that kind of stuff? Like, do you remember almost every play if someone asks you about it or no?
No, not at all. I
Yeah.
remember very little, actually. Probably the opposite.
Yeah.
I barely remember much.
Yeah.
But injuries, I remember.
Do you have a favorite play from your time in the NFL?
Hard to say. I don't know if I have a favorite, honestly. I have a bunch of almost favorites, like a bunch of, man, if I just would have caught that one interception or,
Yeah.
if I would have been able to scoop that one fumble and score those types of plays I remember. But
Yeah.
it was a blur of an experience, honestly, because every week is, you know, out with the old, in with the new. You're constantly prepping, playing, forget about it, go for it. It's really fast paced. Even though 8 years seems like a long time,
Hmm.
it was it's really just like it feels like a dream almost.
Yeah. So your best overall year, would you say it was with the Bears or with the Raiders? Because you led the Raiders in tackles one year, right?
Yeah. My best overall season, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, my best overall like stat season was for sure that first year at the Raiders
Mhm.
because I was playing every snap on defense, and it was just the most action that I'd had up to that point.
Yeah.
And so it was my best year. But I never had a bad experience. Honestly. Every year I was learning a lot. I got to play with awesome, like, super awesome teammates.
Hmm.
A lot of Hall of Famers that I was in the same room with, and it was cool, man. Really cool
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. So thanks for just spending a little time with us. We're talking about at our school this week. Our verse of the week is Philippians 2, verse 3. So in the NLT, it says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. So in the NFL, you probably saw both sides of that, good and bad, right?
You could imagine, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
talking about don't try to impress others. I remember you telling me some stories about guys who would go out and buy a 5,000 belt or something like that just because they could, right? So
exactly.
was there a lot of that type of culture that you had to kind of fight against, the impressing others, the kind of putting yourself out there?
Absolutely. And that is one of the hardest parts to think about, making it through the NFL experience healthy, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally healthy, is because to get there, it's almost like that's the prescription for how you get there. You have to impress, you have to tout yourself, you have to talk about what you can do and how good you are. I remember being interviewed going into the league before the draft and everything, and people just sitting across from a table like this, like, okay, so like tell me your strengths and weaknesses. Like it's an awkward way
Yeah.
to talk about stuff. So with that being the main cultural aspect of it, it is hard to then flip it to, what Jesus instructs us. And Paul here is obviously like trying to implore us to do is just like follow Jesus' example of having had access to everything, having had all the power, and how he led by humbling himself all the way to die like slaves did, like
Yeah.
bandits. Um, so it is the full opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that sorry, kids back there.
You're good.
The cool thing about Jesus' example, though, is I did see some glimpses of it, and I feel like it came out to me where, like, when we explain it to our kids, we have 6 kids, and when we try to explain to them what leadership's about, it's about using, say, your responsibility, your role, or using what you're good at for everybody, not just for you.
Yeah.
And I get that's been the easiest way for us to distill it down for our kids. Like Jesus, presumably would have been perfectly fine in heaven, being perfect and having everything by himself. But the only thing he missed was us, and so he used everything that he had access to and all his power to bless the entire planet.
Mhm.
That should be our example. Like I was smart enough, I had good enough grades, and I was talented enough to pick some career that, I could have excelled at and made maybe a bunch of money or whatever the world says is successful. But I think that the life I'm living now as a stay-at-home dad, I'm trying to use my gifts and my talents to set my family up for success, and set up my community for success by here in the nursery at church, or volunteering at our homeschool community groups, because I feel like that's just what Jesus showed us. So use what I've given you to be the success of everyone around you. And then actually through that you'll realize how blessed you are by the fruit of that. You don't have to strive to put yourself on a pedestal, is what he's telling us.
Yeah, I love that. We've talked about here, like, show up every day looking to help someone else succeed, and if you do that, you'll actually succeed too. So,
Exactly.
so I've known you since high school. You're a pretty chill guy. So like your overall leadership style, especially being in the NFL, being a linebacker, even a middle linebacker, that's kind of a leadership position. How did you find your voice or kind of your leadership style within that?
So for me, man, honestly, I found it just by being thrown in. I was never the vocal rah rah kind of a guy, but I think realized that just certain positions call for certain responsibilities, and a lot of times, probably most of the time when you're growing, it's outside your comfort zone, because just like I'm sure all your athletes and your guys are in there working out, you're getting sore because you're stretching your muscles, you're tearing those muscle fibers to new capacities. It's the same way when you grow your character. You're going to be uncomfortable, nervous, doubtful, like I was. But it's through those moments, especially if you feel like God has put you in those moments, he's going to show up powerfully, undeniably. And you're just going to see how he went before you. Like, I don't want to use like super Bible language, but it's just, I know that I wasn't responsible for what happened through me because I didn't even believe in my own stuff, And so it is really cool. But to answer your question, I got thrown in, and it still feels kind of weird. But in the house now with all these kids running around, it's very natural. Because if I don't speak up, who else is going to at the end of the day?
Yeah. You kind of alluded to it, but even off the field, what have you learned about servant leadership, like serving others as a dad, a husband, a community leader? What does that look like for you since the NFL?
So really, like I said, man, same. I was talking about this actually with Northwestern, where I went to school a few years ago. I was talking to the team about when Jesus fed the multitude, and when they got that food from the little boy before he prayed for it, blessed it, and broke it and gave it out. And the thought struck me that this little boy who's presumably walking, just going home probably with this food, he had I don't know if he had enough for his family maybe, but he definitely had enough for himself. This multiple loaves and a couple of fish, like he could have ate pretty well. But I'm pretty sure he never would have guessed that giving that food to Jesus, he would have multiplied it into feeding an uncountable crowd. And I think it's easy. I think it's easier to give God things when we know we don't have enough. Like when we know we're coming up short, I think it's easy to be like, all right, your help. But that little boy could have been like, no, like I'm going to eat this and I'm going to get full.
Yeah.
But the fact that he gave it to Jesus and let him work with it, he saw something that I'm certain he never forgot. Yeah. And he still got full, by the way.
Right.
And so it's just, that's what I think, I guess, when I'm out here is about like, just what can I give? How can I be a resource to the people around me within how God has gifted me? I'm not all of a sudden trying to be a rah-rah guy, to go outside of how God made me, but I love cooking, so I'll volunteer my services frequently to cater events or to cook for friends, families that just had babies, whatever it might be. But, offering yourself to those around you within the gifts that God's given you, I think is a great way to lead, to be a servant leader, because essentially that's what Jesus did. he offered his full self to us.
Yeah. Awesome. As you think back to like being in middle school, high school, what would you tell our athletes? Like, do you have one or two really practical things that they can work on to be a leader as they go on the court or the field, whether in practice or games?
Yes, I think first, and you'll probably hear this in anything you read about leadership too, do your job. Nobody wants to hear from somebody that's not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So I think the number one thing that I try to do as a leader in my home, in our various community groups, is do what I'm supposed to be doing. For just quick example of that, I volunteer in the nursery on Sundays, like every other Sunday at church. And the kids pastor asked everybody to do, all the volunteers to get together and do a debrief after the service. But for some reason, the other people that I was working with, like, they usually don't come, and I'm not sure why, because I just started. But just the simple fact of when I left the nursery and I said, "Hey, you guys coming to the debrief?" They're like, "Oh, is that what we're doing?" And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, obviously, because that's what we're asked to do. But that got them there, maybe for the first time, and I have to, scream at anybody. I didn't have to judge anybody or have a sit down. I just said, "Hey, I'm going to go do this thing I'm supposed to be doing. Are you going to come with me?"
Yeah. Be that example.
And a lot of times that's what it takes. And then I think after you do your job, then it's building relationships, honestly. And just because the people that you're with, if they don't think that you care about them, really better if they don't know that you care about them. If they have to doubt that, then as a group, you're not going to be able to go very far. I had a friend describe it as organizations they grow as fast as the speed of trust. And it's like, if you guys can really believe that you have each other's backs, and that I'm not just giving you this hypo speech or calling you out for any other reason than I care about you, then you have an opportunity to really, really be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, man, for spending a little time. I'm trying to constantly just put people in front of our kids that are role models. And I think not only have you been successful professionally, but I think you've been successful as a husband, a dad, and more so off the field, really, I think, just as a man of God. So, by the way, we did not plan to have the line in the background, but that's pretty cool. So
yeah, there you go.
No line.
It's actually hand drawn by a friend's daughter. His daughter is an artist. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. No, thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
See you, brother.